face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
Welcome to End of Dragons Daily, the community back and forth show in which we discuss all the fun stuff about the upcoming X-Pack. Footage in the background will be me and my Necro map comping ore, which kind of demonstrates something we talked about recently, the idea that there's really no space for level 80 combat in Corteria a lot of the time because ore doesn't have any hearts, so there's minimal combat needed for map comp, which is one of the only things you as a veteran are probably going back there to do. It's actually amazing to me. That Necro is like the third character I ever made and has never fully explored these maps. I have no idea how they slipped through the cracks there, but hey, that gets me a little bit closer to some more gifts of exploration. Will come in handy if I ever try to round out more Generation 2 legendary stuff. Bunch of miscellaneous comments today, no specific topic. Obviously, the thing on the table right now is this idea of factions and whether the devs will run with that ball in End of Dragons in terms of like player conflict and dynamic borders and a new version of alliance battles, and with the world versus world we'll get something good and so on. But for today, just going with some general comments, and do feel free to drop messages on anything, guys. We're very hyper focused on that factions thing, so today for the first time I actually found myself digging back into earlier videos just to retrieve some other comments. You guys have been so on the ball with the main thing, which we'll discuss tomorrow. Anyway, let's jump in. Edricus says, just a thought. With different possibilities of what will come in terms of specializations, skills, masteries, etc., how will changes each of these different aspects be affected of hero and mastery points? I get the feeling that there is not too much ArenaNet can do since they have built in this system in the game, and at least hero points can be harvested so you can build up a bank for the new release. So there's kind of some word soup there. I'm not sure the main idea of what you're talking about, but I do really think this is important to point out to people. Each big expansion and release we've had with the game so far, veteran players have been able to bank more hero points. I think on my main right now, who has canvassed everything, I think I have more hero points in the bank ready to instantly spend right now than I would actually acquire from the entire process of going level 1 to 80. And going level 1 to 80 is enough points to buy every core specialization and every utility line. Like, there's an absurd amount of free and easy hero points available out there now, especially with Path of Fire going the slightly different tack of allowing you to solo new hero challenges rather than them being a group effort, something that was controversial with Heart of Thorns. There's people on both sides of that debate. I'll leave that sit for now. But because of this, I think you're going to find a ton of players don't really get that idea of an elite specialization as a progression system. Many of us didn't even have it with Path of Fire, and that does kind of suck, you know. Looking back to POF, what I actually did was I created a whole new Elementalist. I knew I wanted to play the expansion on an Ellie, but I made a new one just so that I would have that sense of progression instead of just instantly unlocking the Weaver. And now as I was running around, I kind of had a bit of that new player perspective, because at least hero points and hero challenges are still a character-bound system instead of an account-bound system, and we have the power to do that. I don't know whether I'll make another new character for End of Dragons. And again, you might say, well, look, this is a defunct system. They need to improve this and make some changes. But on the other side, I really think it's not broken. There just needs to be more stuff for us to spend that reserve on. And that's where I go back to that idea of racial specializations that I am so keen on, and filtering in new racial skills and stuff like that with Living World episodes. Bring back some of that Guild Wars 1 skill customization feel. Everyone would love that, and it would solve this issue. But who knows, maybe ArenaNet are happy with it as it is. The only weird wriggle, I think, is in World versus World, where every new expansion, they've got this thing with the heroic notaries or whatever they are, where they kind of have to create a new version each X-Pack, which is very strange. But the idea there is that you could stockpile infinite numbers of those items and then double-click them to instantly get your new specialization, which somehow they don't like the idea of. So when Path of Fire came out, they basically deprecated, got rid of the ability to collect the Heart of Thorns ones anymore. Said that the Heart of Thorns ones only worked for Heart of Thorns, and you needed to do a whole new progression for POF. And that was kind of clunky in their execution, and they'd have to do it again for End of Dragons, and then again for another X-Pack down the line if we really believe that that's what they want to do with this franchise. So yeah, maybe that needs to be addressed, but the rest of it should be okay as long as they're ambitious about new types of specializations. So yesterday we proposed this idea that they could have a new elite specialization that simply revamps your current greatsword skills, so you're using a greatsword in a totally new way, or for any other weapon. And the point was made that isn't this bad for players who want the new elite spec but the old greatsword skills and they're forced into it or whatever? Well, they say with the old weapon new skill thing, you could just make a trait or utility that gives them the base skills back, or at least for a short time. Now, I can totally visualize this. I know exactly what you mean you're going for, but I kind of hate the idea. I think it looks really clunky and just sort of a jammed in ad hoc solution almost, where they should go with something further. And if you think about it, you're kind of losing a trait or a function, you know, a utility skill or whatever, just to restore old functionality. You know, while the other elite specializations that didn't revamp a weapon, they just gave a new one. These guys get 3 Grandmasters, but you only get 2 because the third one is almost like a quality of life tool for you to return to another type of build. And maybe you could say it's justified. See, here's the funny thing about this comment. We're kind of already in this place. And we're already in this place because if you look at something like the Weaver, they have a utility skill, Unravel, which is about restoring regular attunement swap functionality. You no longer dual attune and things sort of just go back to normal. And there you go, that's a utility. And it's also ended up being a really boring and uninteresting utility and an experiment that I'm kind of not in favor of. I think nowadays they've added some extra effects onto Unravel, haven't they? As a stance, you can trait it to give you barrier. I think it gives you a few boons. But really, it's not that fun. And I do feel like, you know, the Weaver kind of lost out a little bit there. I feel like investing in an elite specialization is fundamentally a trade-off. You know, it's a trade-off not just because you're losing a core specialization line, but because it's changing your core profession mechanics. Is it really so crazy to say, oh, well, you're going to change one of your weapons as well? You know, it's a discussion people already have. Oh, I'm an engineer. I want mini mower, but I also want the function gyro. Well, you're not allowed to have both of those because that's the point of the elite specialization. Oh, I'm a spellbreaker, but I still want T3 burst. Well, you're not allowed to have that because that's a point in the specialization, and so on. So I sort of feel like on some fundamental level, ArenaNet could get away with doing this, and they don't have to do any kind of clunky quality of life setup. But all of that said, it's still a poisoned idea that I'm not really an advocate for, as I explained yesterday. Next, we got Jason says, Warrior with 2 foci, double binding of Ipos, here I come. A lot of you guys talked about this. If you aren't familiar, the Gen 2 Focus Legendary gives you this massive demonic purple hand. And the idea, if you're playing unarmed, you're basically slapping people around with these enormous friggin' fists, which is a cool thought. Somebody else had a really intelligent and keen idea too, which is that, hold on, the way that the binding of Ipos is currently coded, if this all did happen and you equipped a main hand focus to punch people with, would the hand render in the wrong direction? And I think it probably would. You'd have like 2 left hands, which is not right at all. Sorry, you'd have 2 right hands. Which is not right at all. So the devs would maybe have to put a little bit more work in there. Come on, that's not a reason to kill the whole idea, though, is it? That's just a little patch that they could put out. I'm still in favor of it. Mal says, get a comment on the thing with Rin and the whole problem with Guild Wars 2's failing events to proceed. It's definitely a part of the Precursor Crafting system. Now, here's my thoughts. I loved the collections when they first came out of Heart of Thorns. The flavor text and the experience and the lore behind a legendary was amazing. The cost in materials was based on what the precursors were worth back then. So, for example, the precursor for Bifrost, the legend, was worth about 1,000 gold. Now, you can buy it off the trading post for 400 gold on a lucky day. Crafting that precursor requires 95 spirit wood. I might be a little off here, but that's generally the amount. That's about 400 gold by itself already, and besides that, I haven't calculated that it's time gated, the cost of other materials you need, the waiting around for events to fail, to progress, especially in ore. This is a huge problem with the temples, since those defense events can be done solo, so you basically need one player on the map that's unknowingly doing an event and it's done. I completely understand why they changed those collections for the other Gen 2 legendaries after Chuk and Champua, but for the Gen 1 legendaries, I hope there is a complete overhaul someday soon. Right now, the collection and the craft of a precursor is super unbalanced and way more expensive than just buying the weapon itself, which basically made the need to craft a precursor unnecessary. Yes, I understand a legendary needs to be rewarding, and lowering the cost of materials in the crafting process could lead to the balance of the economy to go wonky and make the weapon feel less rewarding and easier to craft, but as of right now, it's so unbalanced that there needs to be at least some sort of change. This is a really interesting comment. There's one easy solution that you're super oblivious to, but it's to make the precursors that are on the trading post expensive again. And to do that, They just need to hit the supply, which is the Mystic Forge and the drop rate out in the open world, and make it much harder to roll for pre's. And now they've normalized again, and precursors go back to where they were when Heart of Thorns was there, and or even slightly more expensive. And now this solo crafting idea becomes the more luxurious concept. And there you haven't tampered with the economy in any super negative ways. You haven't tampered with the prestige of legendary weapons. Can I point out, guys, that the Gen 1 legendaries are currently about 1,000 gold cheaper than the Generation 2 ones. And to me, what does that say? That says there's headroom to bring the price back up, and you can do this through resolving this precursor issue, because you're right, there is a serious imbalance here, but I look at it as that, and I don't think that what I've just said can be considered a complete overhaul. You guys have to be really careful of this word overhaul. I mean, an overhaul means a ton of work. It means ripping out everything and building something new. I don't think we're going to see any complete overhauls anytime soon. I think that they're working on an expansion, and that's probably the better priority for now. Another interesting thing to read in this comment above is this stuff about ore and the failing of events. Well, maybe you don't realize this, and I do think it's the fault of the game that people don't realize this because of the way that the achievements are worded. But you get credit for those even when you defend one of the temples. So let's say one guy just flipped Grenth, and you need to flip Grenth so that you'll get your legendary precursor thing done. And now you see that Grenth is there and you're waiting for the temple to fall. Well, yeah, that can be frustrating, but you could just go to Grenth, captured by the Pact, and then as soon as the Risen try to attack it, you defend it and it will count for your precursor collection. The devs already saw these issues and fixed them. That's what I said in the previous video. I don't know how many little niggling things have fallen through the cracks, but there aren't that many. And believe me, this is coming from someone who is trying to get everything in the game. And for the past year and a half, consistently in my time in game, I have been progressing through all of the precursor collections. All of them. I only have like 5 left, and they're in T3. And I can personally attest to not having ran into this issue that much. Dordere says, I keep reading in the comments that many players only do this, or most players don't care about that. Is this just subjective anecdotal evidence, or is there any way for the average player to quantify these statements? Well, yes, it is. I mean, let's be real. It is subjective and it is anecdotal evidence. And a lot of the times, it's not even that. It's just rhetoric. It's the most common, easy form of rhetoric you can throw out on the internet. And you kind of got to learn to be blind to it, I think. I kind of got desensitized to this a long time ago. Anyone in any position in life on any topic can make a claim about some position and presume that they have a bunch of allies, and they can write it to imply that they have a bunch of allies. They can imply that their worldview and their angle is the predominant one, and of course in any fair society, majority rules, right? So you need to shut up and listen to what I have to say. It happens all the time. It's very hard to cross-examine. What I would do if you ever read a comment like that is just take note that it's there and take it as a marker of how bad this commenter is trying to persuade you, rather than their persuasiveness having any substance, just that impulse is there, and sometimes that can be of worth noting. Alan says, hey WP, what do you think the chance would be of, instead of new specializations, the devs add a new trait layer horizontally to the existing specialization options? They could add new hero points throughout the core map, specifically to train mechanics. Like you mentioned in an earlier video, I would like to see more new utility skills, particularly elites. Well, so this is an interesting suggestion. What I think you're saying is you want to have an adept trait with its minor, then master tier, then grandmaster, which is where it currently ends. And you want one after that. You want like a supreme master, I don't know what would come after grandmaster, trait to then choose from a fourth rung. And it's funny, I think a lot of people would immediately sneer at this, but I do think that would sell really well. I think a lot of people really like feeling power creeped. I think most of the time, most people only read balance patches, for example, because they want to feel power crept in some way. And that's why it's, you know, this pervasive, consistent thing throughout the years, that people don't really relish in the idea of logging on and having a challenge. They just want to feel strong. They want to feel stronger than they were before. And giving people a whole new tier, yeah, it's something people would like. And it also kind of avoids this whole issue with Guild Wars where they can't really add new gear tiers and they can't really do the carrot on the stick too cleanly for you because they always sold the franchise on never doing that. So yeah, some kind of patch or sequence of patches, this is actually what I would suggest, where, you know, they revamp a line, and when that line gets revamped, it gets this new tier on the end, and they slowly filter in throughout Living World episodes. Again, do you guys see how fixated I am on this idea that the Living World releases need to be as solid as possible to keep that consistent fan base? If they did that, yeah, I think people would enjoy it. It would create some weird imbalances in the meantime, though, for like PvP and World versus World, so I'm not sure how you could filter these things out necessarily. And when it really comes down to it, if I'm being honest, I just don't see what this does for the game that can't be resolved by simply making more exciting Grandmasters and having everything as it is. In fact, to tell you the God's honest truth, I actually think there are too many passives already. I think that you have to learn 18 passives, many of them so complicated they have primary and secondary effects, or they even have like on-hit effects. They're basically skills. Some of these traits are basically skills. People don't credit them like that, but they really are. The fact that you have to learn 18 of them for any particular build, I think is too much. Add in the passives you're getting from runes and the passives you're getting from sigils, as well as, you know, the incredibly overloaded mastery passives and stuff we're getting at the moment. There's just too much to keep track of in Guild Wars at the moment, and I would actually rather we saw less traits per line, or that you can actually wield less lines. I think if you had just 2 specializations, the game would be in a much cleaner, more interesting place. And I know some of you guys are really going to hate the idea of that, but this would come with balance that made the effectiveness of the traits we do have more powerful. Currently, we have 18. If you went down to a smaller number, just 12, then those 12 could still be as big and bright as impactful as the full 18 were before, but they're not filtered out through 18 different nodes anymore. So the strength of each individual one is more apparent and can be balanced to be more apparent and more fun. Now, that's just my honest thoughts about like the fundamentals. I think it's too late for Guild Wars though now, and they probably won't ever reduce the number of traits we have access to all at once. And I think people wouldn't see the power in that. I think they'd be very upset with it. So we're probably just going to stick with the 18 that we've got, and that's that. The closest I think your suggestion can get is they give you the ultimate master tier, but if you want the ultimate master tier, you have to give up another line. So you can have a supercharged fire magic line, but you'll never be able to try wield. You can only be fire plus one other thing, you know, or fire plus your elite specialization. Taking warrior as an example, maybe you can be a true god at hammer mastery and unlock your whole new tier of hammer mastery, but you're only going to be able to pair that with one other line now, and maybe that's your elite specialization, berserker, spellbreaker, maybe that's another core line. It's kind of your choice. And in that world, you know, maybe they could do something fun. I think there's space, but it would take a lot of ambition from the studio, and I doubt they'll be playing around with stuff like this before End of Dragons, or even around the launch of End of Dragons, because they've got 9 new elite specs that they're working on right here, right now. Paddy Huddo says, hear me out, WP. Here's some speculation on who the big who is talking in the trailer. I think it could be Lissa, Dwayna, Melandru, or Cormier. And here's why. This has probably been said before, so sorry. Those who love for eternity quickly forget what a lifetime means. Talking about the Elder Dragons of the Gods. It doesn't have to be this way. That's Kunavang trying to reason with a new power or a returning power coming to help us in the fight, but will result in the end of dragons. That's interesting because I think of Kunavang as the one on our side, not the other entity. They need me, talking about us, the mortal races of Tyria. They used to walk among us, love us, be worshipped by us. This sounds like a rescue mission. Don't forget that the gods were kind of, in a lot of ways, playing favorites with the humans. It's one of these unreliable narrator situations. But now, I doubt it was Melandru. Barely anything points to her except the voice. Same with Dwayna. Cormier, it could be, was recently mortal, has an understanding of what fighting an immortal being is like, but I hope not her. Lissa, question mark, question mark, question mark? I think this is most likely if it is this story. Female voice, history with Balthazar, the mirror storyline, lots of little in-game bits, such as the missing statue in the Temple of the Ages. She has a part to play, I think. Thoughts, people? What do you mean missing statue in the Temple of the Ages? Is she really not there at the Temple of the Ages? I had another interesting comment from someone quite recently about the temple at the Chantry of Secrets. They said there were like some stab marks in Lissa's statue and that there might be something going on there. I never went in game to quite check it out or what the hell they were talking about though. And anyway, look, I like this idea. I especially like talking about this conversation since we're hearing it at the start of every video at the moment. And, you know, I'm hearing it multiple times a day as I edit these things. But I don't think it's one of the gods. Mostly because you've got to remember, guys, there was a tweet from one of the writers on End of Dragons who said that this is a new character. And I hate that we're in this position where you have to keep track of all this extra information. It's a new character, whatever this thing is. So I think Mother is still on the table to a certain degree because we haven't met Mother yet. Mother was alluded to recently. I think by all criteria, Mother can be considered a new character. So Mother might work, but the human gods? I mean, maybe they're new from the perspective of we haven't seen them on screen yet. You know, so I think Cormyr is absolutely out. Cormyr is not a new character. She's not even new to Guild Wars 2. We saw her in Guild Wars 2. In both games, she had an extensive role. It's not her. Maybe the others you could maybe say because we haven't seen them in game that they're new. But I think we're going a bit further afield than this, guys. There's two it's hard to speculate about this conversation in some ways because it really depends on how big you think their next story is going to be. It's the end of Dragons, one path ends, and now we're on the path of fire. They did with Season 3 into POF, as one of you guys in another comment quite keenly pointed out. You know, we've got the end of Dragons here, but the start of something else. I'm sure that episode 1 of the next season, should we be going this way, will be called the start of blah, 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 or a new dawn begins, or whatever. Whatever this new era's storyline is about, could be massive, and this new character is kind of tied to them. This new character is the bridge between the two stories, and if that's true, it would be very hard at this point to speculate about who that might be, because they could be opening a whole new world of stuff for us to talk about, right? Well, there you have it, guys. That's End of Dragons Daily for today. Please do keep dropping your messages down. Anything that you find interesting or compelling, captivating. You know, I'm going to be hard up for comments as time goes along, so let's keep the ball rolling. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. It's been really, really nice all over Europe, I think, the past couple of days. Beautiful sunny day. It's hard to believe we're still in February, which is generally one of my most hated months. Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoy, and I will see you on the next one very soon.